in SB helicopters. I think it is one of the best game modes for helicopters. If you haven't tried it, please try it. First-person helicopters with, full-on controls. It feels nice. It looks nice. It all feels great. I would fully recommend you at least try it once, just like you should try, ground simulator, enduring confrontation, all of this stuff. What do you think about this type of vehicle? Type gameplay-wise, could you tell about your plans for the helicopter development in War Thunder? We believe that helicopters have their own interesting and entertaining gameplay, which can be truly seen in combat battles. As for our plans, we have already said that we plan to develop it in scope and depth, meaning adding helis for other nations and introducing new systems and perhaps new modes for the helicopter battles. That's a very blanket response. To be honest, that's basically saying, we think that helicopters have a place in the game. Well, obviously, otherwise you wouldn't have added them. And then, what answer is this? They obviously believe in helicopters because they put them in the game. If they didn't believe in helicopters, they wouldn't be in the game. The issue is giving different helicopters for each tree, and we're already running into issues with the German tree, which doesn't have just German helicopters. My god, Japanese helicopters are going to look hilarious. But that is something that I'm sure in the future will get clarified, but that's a pointless answer. That's basically saying, all of the doors are open. Is it possible that helicopters will receive air-to-air missiles in the future? Yes, we think it may be possible, and we are testing the functionality at the moment. Now, this reminded me of something that we... Wait, I've just got to check something. Did I miss anything? No, I didn't. When a dev server came out, I think it might have been the last one for update 1.83, which is shown in this War Thunder Reddit post here by Luftwaffe Plus, they'd added Iglas to the Mi-35M, and I think this is what they're talking about here. I think what they're doing is testing out the air-to-air missile capability of some of these helicopters. Now, on the dev server itself, we weren't able to use these, but they were found, as shown by this picture, and as shown right here. So they are definitely working on something which is, air-to-air missile related. The question is, how useful are they going to be, and how devastating are they going to be? And this is something that only the future will tell. The problem with helicopters as a concept, they are boom and bust. What this means is they're either going to be really good or really bad, and we already see that in game, where they've had a lot of changes put to them since they were really bad at the start, and now some of them are coming out and blossoming into amazing machines. Now, a mechanic like this is another boom or bust idea. And what that means is it's either going to be really good at taking out other helicopters and maybe even jets, or it might be absolutely worthless. And this is the balance that Gaijin has to strike. Now, it's going to be interesting to see the development of these things, because we are starting to get into warfare here, which is more AI-controlled than player-controlled. And if you screw this up, you are in quite a bad place, because it means that the AI is taking over your game instead of the actual players. The players feel like they don't have control of what's going on, and therefore what happens is everything falls apart for the individual player. So they're going to have to really, make sure that those are okay. Will helicopters take part in naval battles? Considering current BR limitations for aircraft in naval battles, it's too early to tell at the moment. Besides that, logically, helicopters will participate in high-rank battles where the vessels are pretty huge, and fighting them without guided torpedoes or anti-ship missiles will be hardly possible. I don't know. This brings many complications to the gameplay and requires further work on guided munitions. So they're basically saying until they work on some anti-ship stuff for helicopters, and I know that there are anti-ship missiles that exist for helicopters out there. There's also specific helicopters that were designed to carry depth charges and things like that, like anti-submarine ones, which would be cool. But the I think with the weaponry we already have in game, I think they could do a lot of damage. I mean, all they have to do is hit the ammo, right? It may be a tough shot, but you have guided missiles, they're quite easy to guide. So even in the current iteration, I think they could be really deadly. But I'm guessing they believe that in the overall idea, they wouldn't be too good. It would be incredibly annoying getting sniped in your PT boat by a hot missile from miles away. I can definitely see that being incredibly annoying. Do you have plans for more Cobra variants and upgrade packages? For example, the AH-1Q modification for the AH-1G, or perhaps the AH-1W Super Cobra to go before the AH-1Z modifications? Yes, we do have more plans to add more AH-1 modifications. You know what would be much better to talk about right now? How about other nations instead of America, Germany, and Soviets? We do exist. We have a place in the game. It would be lovely to get some discussion. Britain exists, Japan exists, France exists, Italy exists. Please, for the love of Christ. I understand that we have 3 major nations and everybody else is kind of left on the whim. You know what was funny about all the leaks about update 1.85 with the high-tier vehicles? You know what there wasn't? A British vehicle. Sucks, doesn't it? Anyway, yeah. Can we stop talking about American helicopters and move on to other nations? Please. I'm getting bored of it. Like every time helicopters are discussed, all it is look at this cool Soviet helicopter or look at this cool American one. There are other helicopters. Talk about them. Much more interesting. I want to see every nation have a helicopter tree instead of some being hampered by not having one. Simple as. Germany quite extensively used the Mi-24D and Mi-8. Can we expect to see these in the future for the German tree? Great, more Russian helicopters. I'm going to have to find a revolver. Mi-8 is unlikely since it was a multi-purpose machine at the time, but we'll think about the Mi-24D. You mean like the Huey? Like the Huey. That's a utility helicopter. Its whole purpose is to be multi-purpose. You added that to the game. That's not an excuse. You gotta come up with a better reason. Do you plan to add light helicopters? MH-6 Little Bird. Oh my... I'm gonna have to go pump weights. Probably, at some point. If you don't know what the AH-6 Little Bird is, it's this little thing. It could carry miniguns and rockets. Yes, it's flexible. Yes, it's a helicopter. Do you plan to add tutorial missions to helicopters? Yes, we do. That's wonderful to hear. I think one of the things when it comes to tutorial missions, it would be a good idea for content creators to create that stuff, just on like their own separate channels. I mean, I know I've started a series which looks into, the fundamentals of War Thunder, and I need to get back to that. The issue is I have not had time. Pumping out a lot of content over the last month, it isn't something that, I have a lot of time to do. I feel like in January and February, when the game slows down a little bit, I'll have a bit more time and be able to do that. So, yeah, look forward to that stuff. Here's some fleet stuff. With update 1.83, we saw the addition of the British Royal Navy to Naval Forces. Is there anything you can tell us about the come next for Naval Forces, Japan or Italy? Where was this for the helicopters? It's too early to tell at the moment. We have already answered that we develop several nations at a time, but I can say that the next nation to be added will be one of these two. Okay, so it's not going to be France. Basically, it's going to be Japan or Italy. They're just not sure which one. Now, Italy had a pretty strong navy, so did Japan. I'd be happy to see either. To be quite honest, right now, after, a month and a half of having 4 new trees, I'm not really eager to have another tree. I'm still not anywhere near grinding out all the trees. I've had a lot of fun playing the lower tier stuff, and I'm still going through the lower tier stuff. I haven't touched the American tree yet. Looking forward to that. So overall, I think we don't need new naval forces yet. I know people want them, but just play the other stuff. We have 4 trees. Just get through it, right? I know none of you have grinded them out fully yet. It's not impossible to do, but I know you haven't done it. Are there any plans to improve the wake effect for ships? Currently, they're a little lackluster compared to vessels in real life. Yes, we are working on it, and preliminary results look very promising. We hope to add this feature in the nearest future. Wonderful to hear. The wake effect is pretty cool. My ships in arcade are definitely bobbing and weaving. Something I found with the S100 1945? Is it? No, I'll just check. Let's have a look. Yeah, sorry, the 1944, this big thing. It rolls very, very hard, and which is kind of annoying, but, I mean, it is how it is. You're gonna have to get used to it. Is it possible to switch on Axis versus Allies, matchmaking in naval battles? At the moment, we analyze efficiency of specific vessels and their BR spread. Unlike ground vehicles or aircraft, the vessels of the various nations can be really different. Thus, there are some... I'm not sure about that. Yes, thus there are some unique vessel types such as Soviet armored boats or British corvettes. So battles nation versus nation or allies versus allies may be imbalanced. We will make a decision about including such matchmaking options after we analyze efficiency statistical data. We're also thinking about adding various events and national teams or even specific lineups and scenarios. Now, that I think is how you do it. I think since if you look at naval battles in general, there are specific nations which have much more of a certain vehicle than others, or they just have, better specific vehicles than others. So it's definitely going to be imber if you do like one nation versus another in specific ways. So it's going to be how that nation is able to maximize its positives and negate the negatives, basically. But since they're going for this mixed battle approach, I think trying to add them into events is the best way possible. Basically, just take the ground simulator idea and put it into naval as an event every weekend or something. I think that would be fun. Do you plan to introduce naval battles for SB mode? And if yes, what missions? No such plans at the moment. It's very hard to think about an SB mode for naval without taking the majority of the play away from the player. What I mean by this is, if you're commanding a ship, you're not firing the massive guns. You are telling the massive guns where to fire. So a lot of it, for me, when I imagine what an SB mode for ships would look like, it would be much more designed around the idea of the captain... kind of more of an RTS game. So you kind of tell which guns to shoot where, but you don't automatically shoot the guns. So this is where your AI would come in. So yeah, it's something I haven't really ironed out properly in my head, but I think it could be done and make it different. Because the biggest concern with SB Naval is that it would be exactly the same as the other two modes, which are already very similar. I think there is a way around it, and you do it through the AI mechanics that are already there. Do you plan to bring more diversity to the mission types, like bring the convoy mode back or add something new? We're working on it, both on making new scenarios and improving current ones. Wonderful, because right now you basically just have one scenario, and the meta of the game is pretty much controlled by the ships and the maps, and sometimes you do need a little bit of difference in the game modes to give you a little bit of a different play style. If there's only one game mode, you want to get stuff with a lot of firepower, which maybe doesn't shoot as far, so you want to concentrate on high fire rates, machine guns, let's say lower tiers. But let's say you're on a map which is a lot larger and it's a 3-pointer and you want to cover 2 of the points, well, maybe you want something with a bit more larger guns, so therefore you can shoot for a longer range. Maybe you're a bit slower, there's a trade-off there, and it's something to think about. Right now, there isn't really much of a trade-off because you can do the same thing every match, apart from on specific maps when it comes to destroyers. Will you implement the aircraft torpedo, the Motobomba FFF or FFF? That might be interesting. We'll see about it. So, if you don't know about the Motobomba FFF, now when reading about this, it sounds very interesting. So first of all, this thing is dropped by a parachute, and it does concentric spirals until it finds a target and hits it. So it goes along in the water. It has the horizontal fin, the vertical rudder, and obviously it has a battery compartment, the lifting eye, the afterbody, the warhead, and the pocket for self-destroying exploder. It basically just goes around, just keeps going until it hits a target and then goes boom. Now, what is interesting is that it's parachuted into the water. Now, my guess is, or it would be cool, is if you could take it out before it hits the water and that would blow it up. But it is an interesting thought, but I think we'll be miles off this idea in general. Do you have any ideas how depth charges should be used in the game? At the moment, they are barely effective. Yeah, at the moment, they work as planned. This is the munition for the fast boats and close quarters. So are machine guns. They're much more effective than depth charges. Like, the issue with depth charges is if you are within 10 meters of a boat, you're either dead, or you don't have an engine, or the other guy's reloading and you're getting lucky. Now, if you are within 20 meters... most of these vessels drop depth charges behind them, so you're basically hoping that the enemy runs into them in a weird fashion. Overall, they are not very useful. I think there is definitely some ways to make them useful. I've seen some interesting plays where, as people have waited around corners, going a little bit quickly, waiting for, the enemy to come around and then dropping the depth charges and running and, killing it, or using it to annihilate destroyers when they're out of torpedoes. So there is ways of doing it. Right now, I don't see them used in a big way, and I haven't seen them used to what I would class as a worthy effect. Like, I haven't seen them win a game or used in a way that's kind of intrigued me, which for every mechanic you want that kind of moment where you're like, oh, I see now. I see how that can be useful. Will you reduce torpedo visibility in RB and visibility depending on the torpedo type? That's possible. Visibility parameters of torpedoes and their trail is one of the few balancing options we have in realistic naval battles. So they're not going to do it to historic values, they're going to do it to balance values. So it's going to be the ammunition argument again. Fair enough, if they want to do that, we'll see how it affects it in the future. I'm guessing right now everything just has the same trails, and then as certain torpedoes get better than others or are shown to be better than others, then the ideas will change. Do you plan to increase survivability of destroyers and all other large ships? In real life, there were situations when such vessels survived heavy damage and stayed afloat, even after the bow was completely ripped off. In real life, such damage as the bow being ripped off usually leads to a situation where the ship is no longer able to take part in a battle and significantly reduces its speed. As for the game, it is possible that a destroyer may survive a torpedo or a bomb unless the magazine detonates. Yeah, it may. May is a big word there. But the survivability of the destroyers, I think, is fine. The only two issues is if you get hit by a torpedo, of course, and sometimes you can't help this because of the map design, which kind of sucks, but most of the time in the destroyer, by that point, you've traded pretty well anyway. On top of this, I feel like it's kind of cheap when you are using a destroyer and your ammo rack gets hit and you just get blown up. Like, I feel like, I mean, I know there are modifications to try and stop this happening. Like, if I have a look here, let's just see. Yeah, it's still working. Right, good stuff. If we go to, whoops. Yeah, like ammo wetting. So there is obviously a percentage there where there's a percentage chance of your ammo rack not going off. It would be nice to see the actual numbers behind that, but because of that, there's an RNG element, and for me, it doesn't make me feel good. Something I found with the S100 1944 is I've had a much worse time in it than other PT boats. And the reason for this is because even though it's got, the MK103 on the front, some 20s on it, all of this, everybody just detonates my ammo at the front of the boat and it nails the rest of the boat. I'm out of the action. And to me, that's the same thing with destroyers. I think it would be nice to see if they were a little bit more survivable, but I think right now, they're in an okay position. Do you plan to add tutorial missions for naval vessels? Yes, we are working on them at the moment. We hope to introduce them in the nearest future. Once again, I think this should be down to content creators. This is a perfect opportunity, right? You've got helicopters, you've got naval. I did that how to aim video. with the naval stuff. The frame rates was pretty ass just because my computer was deciding to be an asshole. But, a lot of positive feedback from that video. People learn how to use their guns. And that's good. That's what you want from a video. You want to give something to the community. And I feel like there is big opportunities here for content creators to go, okay, let's make a tutorial. People want to know how to use torpedoes? Let's do it. People want to know how to use certain guns, which guns are good, what belts to use. Let's do it. How about helicopters? How to fly them? What is the hover mode? What munitions should I be looking at? All this stuff. Let's do it. Let's step up. Man up. Let's get it done. Sounds fun, doesn't it? Nice. Anyway, that's all the questions. Overall, I got a little bit animated today, and the reason for this is there's a lot of similar questions to what I've been seeing over the last few months, especially when it comes to helicopters, and I am just very bored of talking about American and Russian helicopters. I'm also intrigued about a lot of the stuff that was talked about here. It is nice that they're at least acknowledging some of the more crazy ideas. I would class the the guided bombs and stuff to be a little bit niche, to be honest. Like the Motobomba FFF, that's a pretty niche idea. But overall, it's a good Q&A. There's a lot of talking points here. Once again, doesn't really say a lot, what they're going to add and stuff. But what is nice to see is some clarification on ideas, such as, the different matchups when it comes to naval. That's lovely. And what they want to do with helicopters, going forward. And hopefully, in the next few weeks, we see what is going to happen with the next updates. Because we should actually get one before Christmas. That should be on the cards. So we'll see how it goes. Hopefully we see something. If not, I'm going to keep chugging along. Right now, I got some work to do, but after that, it is how it is. As always, if you want to reach me or anyone else on the team, the best way to do it is through the TEC Hub Discord. Link is in the description, along with everything else. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time.